Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Bolivar Live News and our Monday show, Monday morning with Sandra Dial. Sandra, thanks for joining us this morning. Let's take a look at the weather real quick because we've got some stuff coming up the coast, and I'm going to put the radar in motion, and then I'm going to zoom it in so that everyone can see what it's like. We've got a lot of rain down in South Texas, and I know I saw a picture of the Concan River or somewhere around Concan. Brad had showed, and it was out of the banks. And so if you don't have your umbrella with you, you might want to stop and pick one up today because it's looking like it's going to be a rainy day. I want to thank also the people that make this studio possible. Sandra's a big part of it. Swedes Real Estate, Ocean Grill, Latitude 29 Surf Shop, Stingery Restaurant and Marina, Sandra Dial, KellerWilliams Crystal Beach, KJHJ Rentals, The Big Store, Deadly Lures, and Easy Lift Cargo Lift, Crystal Palms RV Park. Without them, we couldn't have this studio, and we use it on Monday mornings for the Sandra Dial show. We use it on Tuesday mornings for the news, and then Thursday mornings. And then this winter, as the weather hampers us from being out, we'll do it some more. I know, Sandra, we've talked about we're going to do some stuff on the beach in some of your houses you have for sale and shows. So we'll be back and forth. But let's kick off the show. Everyone loves to buy a house down here. Some people want to build that custom home. And it all starts with land.
Yes.
Tell us some of the steps. You know, we've been through Ike. There's been a lot of land transfers. Bolivar's one of those that, you know, you really have to do your background, or the title company does. Give us a lowdown and tell us exactly what people need to look for when they are going to buy some property down here.
Well, David, I had put out the request to my Facebook family and friends to give me a topic, something that they were curious about or needed to understand better. And the number one request was learning more about buying land and lots down here on Bolivar. And that can be very tricky. For those of us that were here during Ike and saw the aftermath, and all of us have pictures. So I'm leading up to explaining to you why it's very important when you're looking at buying a land, acreage or land. You need to do a little bit of homework. And if you're working with a real estate agent, she's going to do that homework for you. But Ike was so strong and it surged that many times when it came in, existing homes were taken away, and those that had the concrete underneath, a lot of the land was washed away. The soil was washed away underneath. So after Ike, many of the even properties still today that have not sold or perhaps are not for sale, you'll see these crevices, these deep, holes. And a lot of that happened at Ike, which we're about to have that anniversary in a few days.
That's right.
And so it's important to understand the history of that land, whether there was a septic tank there previously, if there was a home previously. You really need to do your due diligence and ask a lot of questions. And we actually, as real estate agents, the state of Texas has developed promulgated forms that we use to determine if there's been any fill placed in that land. Example, when I'm talking about these crevices, if the landowner filled that land to make it even, and if it was trash fill, example, pieces of concrete, just things that when you buy that land and you start driving a piling through there, it's not going to go. Also, if there's a previous septic system in there, that needs to be addressed and removed prior to heavy equipment going on that land and such as that. Now, I'm not telling you that everyone did that, but it is a great question. It's such a great question that, once again, the state of Texas has a form that we as real estate agents use to determine if there's been any trash fill put in that land prior to you purchasing it.
So that tells them they have to disclose if they've done any backfill, concrete, caved a septic in, because I think they were even supposed to be dug out. if they used any other debris to fill in a spot there.
Well, not all property owners were in a position to do that due diligence. Some of them didn't even have the concrete removed, so you still have a slab there. But if there's a slab there, that's your first indication to start asking a lot of questions. What about the septic system? Where was it located? Is it still there? Was there any fill put in this land to make it smooth again? So anyway, great questions to ask, very important when it comes to purchasing land.
What about another thing that I've heard some people horror stories on is the surveys and the titles, doing a title search and because parts of Bolivar are different than other parts. Port Bolivar is different than up in Crystal Beach.
Well, what we have found is those that don't use a title company or choose not to buy a title policy, not a good idea. Because especially on the Galveston tip of Bolivar, much of that land is still owned by the original developers from back in the 50s.
And yeah, you only actually own a percentage of it, but you can get around that if you do the legwork. Is that right? Or
now, if
can you get 100% ownership?
There has to be an attorney involved to do that, to do a lot of research and find out who to contact as far as in the inheritance line, and that can be thousands of people at this time.
Right.
So it's very expensive, but it is important to make sure that you have 100% ownership or that the seller has 100% ownership. If not, you could find that somebody could knock on your door years later and say, hey, I'm sorry, but I own a part of this land and part of this property now. So.
But none of that is up in the Crystal Beach, Gilchrist, High Island area. Most of it, I've heard, is down on Port Bolivar. Is that right, or is there some up here?
There are still segments, even in Crystal Beach.
Oh, is there?
If the previous owner or the previous purchaser of that land or property did not get a title policy, there is no telling what's on that. It could be a lien. It could be, inheritance, still partially owned by other people. So don't purchase anything without getting a title policy.
Isn't a title policy a common? I mean, most people get that, or do you find that on second homes they may not worry about it?
I don't know that people realize the importance of it. That seems to be another thing that seems to be stressed, very important.
What does a title policy cover?
Well, it makes sure that no one else owns that property and that they will never knock on your door and say, hey, I own part of this. And that can happen at any point if there is still a partial ownership out there.
Or a lien against it, and especially after Ike with the contractors that rebuilt homes or did dirt work, there could actually be a lien where, and a lot of times it's just an overlooked deal where maybe they didn't report that it had been paid or something. And so title policies, like an insurance policy, that land is clear and free of any liens, no more other owners, and that you're going to own it 100%.
Well, and also that's important to know if you're financing land or home. If there's a lien, your lender is not going to touch it until all that's cleared up.
Right.
If you know that ahead of time, you can start dealing with it during the process of the closing. 45 days or so, you can start getting that really taken care of.
What about land down here? After Ike, a lot of people sold. A lot of people decided, well, let's wait and see what happens. Is there an abundance of land? Still some good lots around, and how is that going? Because we've only got 27 miles of paradise that can be sold, and probably 1.5 miles wide at the widest point, 2 miles wide. What's land looking like? Is there still a good availability if someone wants to build a custom home?
There are plenty of opportunities, even still in the A zones, which, to explain that further, is the least expensive flood insurance. And then you still have some opportunities in the V zones, very few beachfronts. Now, the majority of beachfront land that's available right now would be in the newly developing subdivisions.
Okay.
And we do have several of those.
While we're talking about land, if someone's just wanting a location Doesn't have to be beachfront, can be 5 or 6 rows back. A lot of these lots down here are probably, 50 or 75 by 100 or thereabouts.
50 by 100 is a very good standard.
What's a lot if it's 5 or 6 rows back and doesn't have the beach view but beach access from their subdivisions? What are people looking at? Are they looking at 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, or does it just depend on the area?
Depends on the subdivision, whether it's restricted or unrestricted. That definitely.
And we do have those down here.
We do have those down here. We actually have what appears to be a subdivisions that on one side is restricted and literally on the other side it is not.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And unfortunately, you can't control what someone's going to do with their land or how they use it, whether it ends up being a junkyard, basically. No care, no pride. And so there's nothing you can do about that in an unrestricted subdivision.
But I know down here, the subdivisions that do have restrictions, it's visible. You can tell. Even just driving by, you can tell the subdivisions that have. And most major ones do, I guess, down here from what I've seen.
Well, some did not enforce their deed restrictions after Ike. And after a period of time, if you do not enforce the deed restrictions, legally, you do lose the right to
have them.
To enforce that deed restriction. Not the whole deed restriction does not disappear. It does not void the whole restriction document. But it will, like example, many had a lot of compassion for those that lost everything, and they brought in trailers and RVs, and that was fine for a short period of time. But once they start building decks around them and over them, they're not going anywhere. And if you did not, as a property owner group per se, go in and say, hey guys, you've got to get out of here, because if not, this can turn into a trailer park. And I went through that even in my own subdivision. So once again, it's very obvious the subdivisions that are deed restricted, meaning not allowing commercial business within that subdivision, are travel trailers, RVs, and such as that. And many of the subdivisions actually will have some notice at the entrance, deed restricted subdivision. Be cautious of that. It's very important, and don't think there's going to be any leeway on that. Those that are enforcing those deed restrictions as a community, they're enforcing them.
Yeah, and that's what I've seen here, and it's really for the better of the property owners to keep the property values up. And are there any, a lot of subdivisions, do they carry it as far as square footage, colors of your homes?
No.
In Houston, I know they do some, you have to get your color approved. You have to have a house of so many square foot. But we don't see that down here mainly. It's just more or less on what you can have on your property to make sure it all stays homes.
Well, some of the, I'm going to say the more expensive subdivisions, and I could name Biscayne, Rancho Caribe, and even Waterways. Those deed restrictions do have a minimal square footage, but nothing to do with what paint you use
or color, roof, or anything.
No.
Okay.
It's not so stringent that you can't control what you do with your property.
Well, if people have more questions on land, or are looking for land, looking for a house, ready to sell their house, how can they get hold of you to further the conversation and you help them out?
Well, I'm available by calling 409-656-7255. And I'm here at Crystal Beach full-time. I live here and have an office actually very close to David's Bolivar Tourism Center.
Corner.
Yeah, we're kind of neighbors. But very easy to reach, and if we don't answer the phone, it's because we're with clients. The people that are in front of us are the most important at that particular moment. Leave a voicemail. We'll call you back.
And do you have a website?
I do, and it is dial, the letter N, the number 2, realestate.com. So it's dialn2realestate.com.
And if people have, they can make comments on our feed here, but if they have topics that you want to cover, leave a comment here, go to our website and email her off it. off the website, give her a call. But let us know, because this Monday Morning with Sandra Dial is at least a 20-week program, if not longer. And so we want to cover what y'all want to hear. Whether it be insurance, zones, just anything you want to know about real estate in Bolivar. Sandra's a local down here. She lives here. She works and breathes the salt air. And so buying down here and selling down here is a little different because of the zones and the insurance and the flood and Ike. And so she's here and all real estate agents, but I know she goes out of her way to really inform your customer or your listing what's best for them. So you can get hold of her by phone, email, on our website. And we're going to be here every Monday morning, either here at a home she has on the beach somewhere at 8:30 a.m. with the Monday Morning with Sandra Dial. Sandra, thanks for taking time this morning. Let's see if we can get out of here before the rain starts and put our boots on, and I'm going to go get an umbrella.
David, one more thing. Please, guys, do send us your questions. If you have a question about either a transaction that's already transpired even, just to learn, because that's what I'm here for, is to pour into you education, to be better informed consumer. And I would love for you to share with me your concerns or questions about real estate.
That'll work. We'll see you next Monday. This is David with Bolivar Live and Sandra Dial with KellerWilliams Crystal Beach. Y'all have a great week. Come see us. Explore Bolivar Peninsula. You'll love it. And God bless.
Bye-bye. Thank you.